Hey, good morning, gang, and welcome again to another Morning Coffee and a Thought brought to you by Wings of Faith Ministries here in Sarnia, Ontario. Great to be with you again, and I hope you've got your coffee. I've got mine right here. This morning, I want to go to Luke chapter 22 and look at a sentence which Jesus will speak in that chapter, saying this is your hour when darkness reigns. I want to look at the context surrounding that sentence and what it might mean for us in our daily lives that we're living here in 2026. So we'll get back to our thought in just a moment. First of all, I want to remind you, Morning Coffee and a Thought can be seen every Friday afternoon, 1 p.m. on our YouTube channel, 8 a.m. on our Facebook page on Sunday mornings. Also on the YouTube channel, Journey of Insight. Al LaChapelle and I are discussing the foundational truths of the Christian faith as laid out in Hebrews 6 verses 1 and 2. Also a reminder that if you want any information, if you have a prayer request or you want to make a donation to this ministry, you can reach out to us at wingsoffaithministries.ca. Also, I want to take a minute to thank all of you who have subscribed to the YouTube channel. We're now over 1,200 subscribers, and we just want to say thank you to you for that. All right, let's get back to our thought. Throughout the 3 years of Jesus' ministry, he would take time to warn his disciples, and we know of at least 3 occasions when he warned them that the ministry was going to end with his suffering and death. Now, we first hear of it in Matthew chapter 16, where Jesus will take his disciples aside, tell them that there is a time that he is going to suffer, and he's going to be rejected by the religious establishment. He will tell them again after his transfiguration in Matthew 17 that he will be handed over into the hands of his enemies. And he'll be even more explicit in Matthew chapter 20 when he tells them that he will be spit on, he will be mocked, he will be scourged, and of course, crucified. So, all these warnings were given to the disciples prior to Jesus' crucifixion. Yet, Jesus' disciples had a very difficult time being able to wrap their heads around what he was telling them. They didn't seem to get it, and the scriptures tell us that they were afraid to really bring it up with him. And so, as these 3 years marched on, these warnings were given, but not really received by the disciples. That takes us to the Last Supper in the upper room in Jerusalem. Now, you can understand the disciples' thinking. In his ministry, they knew there was opposition. They knew that the religious establishment opposed him. But they didn't dare touch him because the crowds being present. And the crowds were definitely behind him. Jesus was a very popular figure. But at the Last Supper, Jesus will warn them yet again. First of all, he will tell them that one of them is going to betray them. And they don't know who it is. We know that John and Peter maybe figured out it was Judas. But he warns them that one of them will sell him out to the authorities. He also warns them that Satan has desired to sift them all as wheat, that they're going to be faced with a very sincere temptation. And he tells them that they're going to end up being fugitives in Jerusalem. So all these warnings are given to them in the Gospel of John at the Last Supper. So he definitely warned them throughout the ministry, and especially that evening at the meal. Now we know they crossed the Kidron Valley over to the other mount and entered the Garden of Gethsemane, where they were all alone, no crowds present. There, Jesus will tell them again, watch and pray that you don't fall into temptation. The scriptures tell us that he then went a stone's throw away from them, where he prayed earnestly and in agony over what was going to be his next 48 hours. He comes back and he finds them fast asleep, where he will say to them, could you not watch with me just for 1 hour? It is then that the disciples are totally taken by surprise. Judas has betrayed Jesus, come back to that garden knowing that that's where they met at night, knowing no crowd would be present. And it's there that Jesus is arrested and the disciples are caught off guard. And there in Luke 22, Jesus will say, this is your hour when darkness reigns. The reaction to the disciples seems to be all over the place. Peter takes out a sword and strikes a servant of the Jewish priest, cutting off his ear. Then we find out the disciples ran for their lives, thinking they too would be arrested. None of them really prepared for what happened. I want to carry that into our lives. All of us are going to face an hour of trial and darkness in our lives. A time when things have gotten out of control. It could be a medical diagnosis. It could be a sudden loss in the family. An hour of darkness can come in many forms and ways. And the thing is, most of the time, it's unexpected. And we find ourselves, like the disciples and Jesus, out of control. Events have now taken us over. The question becomes, how do we react during those hours? Now we know that Jesus held up, and never did he shrink back from his confession that he was the Son of God. Whether it was before Pilate or Herod, Jesus maintained his confession. The disciples, not so much. Peter ended up denying that he even knew Jesus, and does it 3 times. The other disciples basically ran for their lives. And so we find out in those times of temptation and darkness where we really stand as believers, and are we ready for them? Jesus gave the disciples the key. He constantly told them to watch and pray. And that night in the garden, that was his message to them. Watch and pray that you don't fall into temptation. When the hour of darkness hits our lives, that is when we're most tempted to fall away, when our faith is tested to its limit. And usually it blindsides us. It hits us where we don't expect it, just like it did that night in Gethsemane to the disciples. That's why it's so important that each and every day we watch and pray, so that when that hour hits us, we don't crumble. We're all going to experience hours of darkness in our lives, hours that just come upon us, hours that we'll never feel that we're prepared for. And yet the secret is to watch and pray and maintain our relationship with Jesus Christ at all times, so that in the midst of that darkness, we can be a light. Some may even say today that our world has entered an hour of darkness, of uncertainty, of upheaval. I go back to Isaiah chapter 60, where the prophet says, when the earth was covered with darkness, even gross darkness. But the prophet says that in the moment of darkness, we, in the midst of that darkness, can be a beacon of light that can shine. It's the Holy Spirit that enables us to have that light, to be able to shed that light in the midst of darkness, and to keep, as Jesus did, our confession of Him strong in our hearts, and to rely on Him in the midst of the darkness. Yes, there will be hours of darkness when it seems we've lost control, when darkness is reigning. And yet, remember that we, in the midst of darkness, can be a light to others, enabled by the Holy Spirit, by our faith and our reliance and our trust in Jesus Christ. Listen, have a wonderful morning, enjoy your coffee, and we'll see you again next week.